Hi, and welcome to this screencast. In this screencast, we are going to be looking at saving data within our apps. As we said, an app that doesn't save data is really like a pub that has no beer. It might look great, but at the end of the day, it's useless. So we want to make sure our apps aren't like that. We're going to be using the playground we created in the previous course. That is the playground where we had our book class. The code should be familiar to you, and we're going to further develop it, demonstrating how we can save data. So let's get started. So here we have the code right in front of us, and the first thing I need to do is to make sure the class implements Decodable protocol. So to do that, up here on our first line, I'm going to add Codable. And beautifully, Xcode brings it up and allows us to just use the autocomplete. Now this will implement Codable, and I'm going to run it. And you can see running book class, we've got it done, and it didn't really do a great deal, and that's because we haven't done anything yet with Codable. So we now need to start adding the code that will allow the saving of our data. Let's do that. So let's come down here and start adding some code. The first thing we need to do is create our property list encoder object. So we go let property list encoder equal property list encoder, and we can see it here, and we've got that open and close brackets. The next thing we need to do is put it within that if statement as we attempt to encode our book. So if let, and I'm going to say encoded book. So I'm creating a new variable equals try, because we need to try, and we go property list encoder, I should say. So property list encoder dot encode, and we're going to encode our book that we created. So that was the book we created up here, there. So we're now encoding it. And don't be concerned about getting the error messages coming up. That's just because we haven't finished writing our code yet. So now, within our if statement, I'm going to add print encoded book. So print encoded book. And we can see all of the errors have disappeared. And let's now run that code. We've run the code, and you can see we got our print statement from here is what you see on this line here. And then we've printed our encoded book, but all we get when we print our encoded book is the size of it. And there's 111 bytes. So we've successfully encoded our book. The next thing we need to do is go about decoding it. So let's add the code for that now. So we need to add that code. We come back up here now within still that first if statement, and similar to when we encoded a book, we're now going to create things we need, or the objects we need for decoding. So I'm going to say let property list decoder be equal to property list decoder. So I'm creating a property list decoding object. Then I want to say if let, and I'm going to have my decoded book now. We had our encoded book. Now I want my decoded book. So say if let decoded book equals, and it's a try statement because we've got to try to see if we can do it. We want to have property list decoder. There it is. Property list decoder dot decode, and we want to decode, and the type we're decoding is book, self, and then we're doing that from our encoded book. So we've got that from encoded book, and then the last thing I want to do, of course, is I need to add my curly brackets. I want to, if this succeeds, I want to print my decoded book. So there we have our code. It's all there, and you'll see all the errors disappear. And let's run that code and see the success of it. And there we have it. We have our first line here. There, that was from this print statement up here. We then printed our encoded book, and you see we got 111 bytes. And then we decoded our encoded book, and we printed it out, and this is the result. So we've done it. We've now encoded a book, we've decoded it, and we've printed it out. So in that sense, we've saved our data. The only thing is, this data doesn't persist. So we're going to have to make some adjustments to our code so that we have persisting data. And we're going to do that next. So persisting data, what is that, you're asking? Very simply, persisting data is data that is there after our app stops and restarts again. So we might have to restart our phone or our iPad, and then when we open our app again, we want that same data to still be there. So that's all persisting data is. Let's go about adding code to have our data persist.